Time is supposed to move forward, second by second, day by day, an arrow, not a circle. But what happens when that arrow unnaturally bends back on itself? What happens when tomorrow is just today, again and again and again? In fiction, paradoxes and time loops force us to confront something terrifying. Not just the mechanics of time, but the psychology of being trapped inside of it. They test not only our logic, but our sanity. Today, I want to share some of my favorite depictions of time loops and paradoxes across all of media. A lot of these don't just entertain, but they unsettle me. They really show us how fragile we are when time refuses to let us go. At its core, a time paradox is a contradiction. It's a closed circuit of cause and effect. Think of the grandfather paradox. If you travel back and kill your grandfather, you prevent your own existence, which prevents you from traveling back in time in the first place. It is this weird knot in time that a lot of stories have tried to make interesting, but a lot of them just become unsettling at a certain point. It's its own kind of paradox, a stretch of time that resets, often after death or failure, leaving our characters to relive events endlessly. In storytelling, these loops and paradoxes aren't just puzzles, they're mirrors. They reflect back our fears of inevitability and of repetition, of fate that we cannot escape. And when done right, they don't just bend our minds, they break our hearts. Let's begin with one that defines the genre. It's Groundhog Day. On the surface, it's a comedy. Phil Connors wakes up in a place in Philadelphia that I'm not even going to try to pronounce every morning to the same day. At first, there's freedom there in that loop. He steals, seduces, indulges, but indulgence turns into despair. He dies again and again, only to wake up by the same song ringing in his ears. This is where the film becomes pretty psychological. Imagine the weight of endless failure. Imagine remembering every mistake, but never moving forward. The loop becomes less about time and more about identity. Who do you become when days don't add up? Bound to just fail every day with no meaning to every day. No matter what you do, you're always going to wake up the same day at the same time and end the day in failure. What makes Groundhog Day timeless is that escape doesn't come through cleverness or force. It comes through change. By reshaping himself, Phil reshapes his fate. Stephen King's 11/22/63 explores not a loop of days, but a loop of history. Our main character discovers a portal to 1958 and is tasked with preventing JFK's assassination. But in King's world, as we know, the past doesn't always want to be changed. Every single attempt is resisted. Cars won't start, doors jam, accidents happen, the timeline itself rebels. Even when Jake succeeds, the paradox to this interference ripples forward. JFK doesn't die, but wars, destruction, and suffering follow. It's somehow worse than one of the most beloved presidents of our time being assassinated on live television. Through all this, he undoes his success, accepting that time is a loop that snaps back into place no matter what. The biggest lesson here is our history can be visited maybe in fiction, but never escaped. Few stories tackle paradoxes as ruthlessly as Dark. If anybody hasn't watched this, by the way, this is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. It starts with missing children and spirals into generations of entangled families, all trapped in a closed loop of time, involving every single character of our main character's family, himself, his brother, his dad, as well as future and past variations of himself. Characters are forced to realize they're not free. Their lives, everybody they love, everybody they hate, everybody that sticks by them, and everybody that betrays them is all scripted. Dark is existential horror disguised as science fiction. In this show, time is not a line, it's a knot that nobody can untie. The show asks a devastating question. If your choices were always predetermined, will they still matter? For our main character Jonas, the answer is almost unbearable. We have our other protagonist, Martha, and they are in love with each other. Their love definitely is real, but it is also inevitable and doomed. Steins Gate is one of the only anime I've actually watched, fun fact, and it's probably one of the most emotionally punishing depictions of time manipulation. Rentaro stumbles upon a way to shift timelines, but each shift comes at a cost. He alone remembers every single failed attempt, every death, every trauma. His friends reset, but his mind does not. The psychological weight is crushing. Imagine carrying thousands of lives, thousands of failures inside your head while everybody else just moves on and are so unaware. It's almost like you're living in a dream that doesn't just trap the body, it traps the soul. Then there's predestination, based on a short story, All You Zombies, but this is not a time loop, it's a character loop. The protagonist discovers he is his own mother, own father, his own enemy. His life is a closed circle of identities, folding endlessly back on itself. There is no before or after. The paradox isn't just temporal, it's existential. Who are you when you begin and end with yourself? Kinda like Dark, this gives us inevitability, a character who can literally never leave because the loop is who they are. It's honestly one of the most unsettling on here because it's just so bleak. Russian Doll uses the loop not just as punishment, but as therapy. We follow Nadia, who every day dies, then gets to come back and relive her birthday in New York. At first, it's honestly crazy. Then we get to the sad parts. Then it becomes very revealing. The loop is basically a metaphor for the trauma, the way unhealed wounds force us to relive pain endlessly. She goes through each day not knowing how to actually face these problems, but she's kind of just experiencing it, which is very indicative of how important this is to actual trauma in the real life. And near the end, it kind of deviates from our traditional time loop stories because it doesn't end when the loop breaks. It ends when Nadia learns how to confront her past, connect with others, and move forward. You just have to live long enough to actually learn how to cope with things. Across all these stories, we see patterns. The loop in Groundhog Day demands growth. 11/22/63, the past fights back and demands to be preserved. In Dark, destiny feels like a cage you're thrown into, and no matter how hard you really try, you can't make everything the way it was before it started. Steins Gate, memory is the heaviest prison. In Predestination, the loop and our characters are basically indistinguishable. And in Russian Doll, escape only comes through healing. Time loops and paradoxes strip away our illusions of freedom. They ask whether change is actually possible, or if it's just an illusion, whether fate is malleable, and whether identity can survive when time refuses to move forward. Are we going to stay the same? How much do we lose ourselves in these time loops? Time is supposed to move forward, but in these stories it doesn't. And maybe that's why we keep coming back to them, because deep down we feel stuck sometimes. I know sometimes when I'm watching these stories, I definitely feel extra sympathy for these characters because I feel the same way they are, but obviously in these stories, it's science fiction, and what we feel is visually shown to us on the screen. And all of our routines, regrets, all the things that we wish we could redo feel very bleak. Time loops make that feeling more literal, obviously, because we get to physically see what's happening from a third person point of view, but we can get some pretty damn good lessons out of these stories. They show us what it means to be truly trapped, but also what it takes to break free. I know there's countless other paradoxes and time loop stories, but I want to know which ones haunt you the most. What stories made you feel the weight of time pressing down? Please let me know in the comments, and until next time, well, if there is a next time, I hope and pray your tomorrow is actually tomorrow.